I do want to say today's episode is going to be kind of heavy. So before we get into it, warning, this story involves a child. And if that might trigger you, I'd maybe skip this one. It's an image most people wish they had never seen. A small cardboard box sitting in the dead brush up a quiet roadside. The kind of box you might expect to hold toys or clothes or something forgettable from a department store. But inside this one was a child, a boy no more than 4 years old, naked, bruised, and posed as though someone tried to give him a dignified final moment after taking his life. When police lifted the lid that morning in February 1957, they had no idea they were staring into a mystery that would outlive every detective who touched the case. No name, no witnesses, and no missing child reports. Nothing but a boy with neatly trimmed hair, recently clipped nails, and signs of a life marked by neglect, pain, and secrets someone desperately wanted buried. For decades, he was simply America's unknown child. And for 65 years, the question wasn't just who killed him, but who he even was. On February 25, 1957, a college student named Fred Benanese was walking alone along Susquehanna Road in the Fox Chase area of northeast Philadelphia. He claimed he was checking his muskrat traps, though he didn't have a license for trapping in the area, a detail that would come back to haunt him when he hesitated to call police. As he moved through the brush, he noticed a J.C. Penney branded cardboard box discarded near tangled weeds. It had once held a baby bassinet. Curious, he pulled the flaps back and froze. Inside was a young boy wrapped in a thin, cheap flannel blanket. His hair looked recently cut, almost as if someone had trimmed it after he died. His eyes were half shut, his mouth slightly open, and his body showed bruises in various stages of healing. Though the February air was cold, the boy's small frame showed no signs of frostbite. That meant he hadn't been there long. Fred panicked. He left the area. He said nothing. It wasn't until the next day, after obsessing over what he found and wrestling with the consequences, that he anonymously called police. Officers arrived quickly, and what they found was far more complicated than a tragic case of abandonment. The boy appeared staged, washed, and deliberately placed. Whoever left him there wanted him found, but not identified. The boy was estimated to be between 3 and 5 years old. His hair had been crudely chopped, with uneven patches and clumps, suggesting it had been cut after death. likely to change his appearance. His nails were trimmed short. His eyebrows appeared trimmed as well, an unusual detail police weren't sure how to interpret. Malnutrition was obvious. He weighed only 30 pounds, far below the average for a child his age. Old bruises covered his legs, arms, and torso, indicating long-term abuse rather than a single violent event. For investigators, the most alarming detail wasn't just the abuse. It was the lack of anything that could tie him to the world he came from. No clothing and no shoes and no personal belongings and no witness reports. In an era where missing child cases routinely made newspaper headlines, the disappearance of a child this young should have triggered an immediate outcry. But no one came forward. No parents, neighbors, relatives, and no one recognized him. Police fingerprints didn't help. Hospital records didn't help. Orphanages and foster homes turned up nothing. Even checking newly purchased bassinets from JCPenney yielded no solid lead. The child might as well have materialized out of thin air. The case soon exploded across Philadelphia news. Flyers were printed with the boy's reconstructed face. Posters were mailed nationwide. His fingerprints were circulated. Though they matched nothing, investigators even dressed the boy in proper children's clothes and photographed him in a dignified pose, hoping the public would respond differently to a more humanizing image. Tens of thousands saw the posters, and no one recognized him. The autopsy was grim and revealing. Cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, but the broader picture told a story of long-term suffering. The boy had scars from what appeared to be surgical procedures, including a small L-shaped scar on the chin and another one on the groin. His esophagus showed signs of chronic inflammation, suggesting he may have vomited frequently or suffered from malnutrition and neglect for a long time. Something else stood out. His hands and feet were wrinkled, pruned, in a way consistent with prolonged exposure to water, possibly a recent bath. Investigators theorized that the killer washed the boy after death to remove trace evidence. The blanket found with him was worn and cheap, with unusual stitching patterns that investigators used to trace possible origins. It was mass-produced, but hundreds of miles of distribution routes made it possible to narrow it down. Then there was the box itself. JCPenney sold the exact model of bassinet in the Philadelphia region. Police eventually traced the box to a nearby store in Upper Darby. Records showed that a shipment of bassinets was delivered around Christmas. Out of all the boxes in that shipment, investigators could only confidently account for every unit except one. One missing bassinet, one missing box, no buyer information, and no clues about who purchased it or why. When you have a child victim, you expect someone to report them missing. But weeks turned into months, and not one legitimate missing child report matched the boy. The first major lead focused on a family who ran a foster home less than 2 miles from where the boy was found. The foster father, Arthur, was known for odd behavior, and the household had a reputation for being strict and emotionally volatile. Investigators found a bassinet at the property similar to the type sold with the JCPenney box. They only found blankets that resembled the one the boy was wrapped in, but nothing definitively connected the family to the crime. Their biological and foster children were accounted for. No one admitted knowing the boy. Detectives weren't convinced. They believed the proximity was suspicious. They believed the temperament of the foster parents was a red flag. They believed the house had secrets. But belief is not evidence, and the case stalled. Another theory came when a man in New Jersey said the boy resembled his nephew. After a full investigation, it turned out the nephew was alive and well. Other tips flowed in and died out just as fast. Some people insisted they recognized the boy from church. Others believed he looked like a child they once saw living with a reclusive couple. All were dead ends. With each passing month, the case hardened into an impenetrable mystery. Years later, in the 1960s, a woman known only as Martha emerged with a disturbing confession. Her psychiatrist contacted police, saying his patient claimed her mother had purchased a young boy from his biological parents, kept him in secrecy, and abused him. Martha claimed the boy was subjected to beatings, humiliation, and confinement before being killed in a moment of rage. She claimed she was present when her mother forced the child into a bath, struck him, and then panicked when he died. According to her story, they drove to Fox Chase and placed him in the box where he was later found. This confession was emotionally explosive. It included details about abuse, secrecy, and neglect, but police couldn't corroborate anything. Martha had a history of mental health struggles. Her timeline didn't consistently match the forensic findings, and while she described the boy's haircut and bath, those details had widely circulated in the press by then. Without physical evidence, the confession collapsed under scrutiny. Still, some investigators privately believed Martha knew something. But again, belief isn't proof. As decades passed, the boy in the box became one of the most analyzed cold cases in American history. Amateur sleuths, seasoned detectives, and forensic specialists all took their turn discussing the evidence. The blanket, the box, the haircut, the wounds, the malnutrition, everything told a story, but never the full one. Some believed the boy was the child of traveling carnival workers, constantly moving from state to state, never long enough in one place for anyone to notice his disappearance. Others thought he was the unreported child of a young, unwed mother who hid the pregnancy from her family. A few suggested he might have been institutionalized, given the surgical scars and malnutrition, and that the institution covered up his death to avoid scandal. Each theory had strengths. Each had gaps. And year after year, the public interest grew. By the 1980s and 1990s, the case became a cornerstone lesson in cold case methodology. The Vidocq Society, an elite group of forensic experts and criminologists, took the case on in the 1990s, calling it one of the most haunting and unsolvable mysteries they had ever encountered. They refined the timeline, reevaluated the autopsy, reanalyzed the physical evidence with modern techniques, and yet even they couldn't break the identity wall. Investigators were stuck. They had a crime, they had a victim, but they still didn't know who he was. One of the most haunting aspects of this case is how long the boy existed as a symbol rather than a person. For decades, he was buried under a small headstone that read, "America's Unknown Child." People visited, they left flowers, they told their children the story of the boy no one claimed. But that anonymity created a strange kind of suspended grief. You can't truly understand a case when you don't know who the victim was. You don't know their struggles, their environment, or the people who may have harmed them. Police revisited the original evidence repeatedly. They compared DNA internationally. They tested mitochondrial and nuclear DNA as technology advanced. They scraped degraded evidence for microscopic traces that could produce genetic markers. They re-examined the hair and fibers. They ran the fingerprints through computerized databases that didn't exist in 1957. Still nothing. This case became a cliffside that investigators climbed year after year, reaching for answers that always hovered just out of reach. And then finally, technology caught up. In November 2022, the Philadelphia Police Department made an announcement that would send a shockwave through the true crime community. After 65 years, the boy in the box finally had a name. Joseph Augustus Zarelli.
Without the hard work, dedication, and passion and the doggedness of the many, we would not be here today to give America's formerly unknown child, Joseph Augustus Zarelli.
Born in January of 1953, a 4-year-old boy from West Philadelphia. His name was uncovered through cutting-edge forensic genealogy. Investigators extracted a usable DNA profile from preserved evidence. That profile was uploaded into public genealogical databases, where volunteer genealogists built out family trees, cross-referenced distant cousins, triangulated relationships, and painstakingly narrowed the search until one branch, one lineage, came into focus. From there, investigators located surviving relatives who voluntarily provided DNA samples. The science confirmed it. The boy in the box was Joseph. Joseph had living siblings, living relatives, a family tree, a history. But that revelation brought more questions than answers. His parents are deceased, and investigators have never publicly stated whether they believe the parents are responsible for his death. The police declared the identification a major step forward, but they also admitted that solving his murder may be far more difficult. When detectives revealed Joseph's name, they emphasized one thing. This child had been deprived of dignity in life, but he would no longer be deprived of identity. Identifying Joseph was a monumental step, but it didn't reveal the full truth of what happened to him. Investigators have not publicly confirmed who was caring for Joseph at the time of his death, nor whether he was living in his biological household, an extended family home, or some other arrangement. There are hints, quiet ones, but his early life may have been marked by instability. But without confirming names or relationships, the police remain cautious about accusing anyone. Some investigators still believe the foster home near the discovery site was connected, either directly or indirectly. Others are convinced Joseph died within his biological family home. Some think extended relatives may know more than they've said, and others believe the killer may already be dead. The truth is, we don't know who harmed Joseph. We only know he suffered. We know he was malnourished. We know he was struck and abused over time. We know he was cleaned and posed. We know someone cared enough to give him a final haircut, but not enough to keep him alive. And we know someone hid a terrible secret for 65 years. Cases like this force us to confront the hardest part of storytelling in true crime. Some victims remain unknown even when you learn their names. Joseph lived 4 short years, and those years left so few footprints in the world that investigators spent more than half a century piecing together scraps of evidence just to honor him with identity. But Joseph's story is no longer a mystery without a face. It is a child's life restored, at least in part. His memory is no longer a headline, no longer a cold case number, no longer America's unknown child. Now he is Joseph, a boy who deserved more than the world ever gave him, a boy whose name is finally spoken, a boy whose story will not fade again. His name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli. I know this episode was heavy. It's never easy to cover a case that involves children. It's not easy for you to watch it. It's not easy for me to make it. I get very emotionally invested in these videos that I do. So I know I need to go and reflect a little bit. And for the time being, we're finally able to talk about a little boy who has a name. His name is Joseph. And if you did like this video and you want to see something more like it, or even anything else that I post, just go ahead and subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel. Thank you for watching.